It is time now for Truth or Fake, our daily fact-checking segment, for which I'm joined by James Creedon. Hello, James.
Hi, Tom.
Now, you've been looking at the presidential debate here in France, which was held last night. Several French media fact-checked that debate live. Tell us about some of the advantages and disadvantages of live fact-checking.
Well, it is indeed a somewhat perilous exercise. France 24 didn't fact-check the debate live last night. And I said it would be a chance to take a step back and look at some of the analysis of, I suppose, the role of fact-checking, especially for a live debate. This is a Wall Street Journal piece going back to 2008, and it spoke then of the fact-checking fad. It's opinion journalism thinly disguised as straight reporting. That's the opinion, I think you could say, of James Taranto writing in the Wall Street Journal well before social media really took off. And of course, that did shift the importance, I suppose, of fact-checking in the aftermath. But what he says then, I think it's worth noting, is the fact-check is opinion journalism or criticism masquerading as straight news. The object is not merely to report facts, but to pass a judgment. And he was looking at, I suppose, the Democrat versus Republican political landscape in the United States and saying that what the Washington Post and other media were doing is fact-checking one side more than the other, if you like. In any case, that goes back to 2008, and I suppose it is somewhat relevant to things today. But then this is an article from 2014, so we're kind of getting closer to, I suppose, the current situation today. And this was by David Uberti of the Columbia Journalism Review. Now, what he said is there is a lot of pressure, especially since social media, to constantly publish. I suppose we also see that with rolling news. It is one of the pitfalls of the media. What audiences expect on the social network, and the resources need to confirm or deny new factual claims. Sometimes there is a little bit of a gap between the two. So he spoke about how Twitter and fact-checking, in particular for political debates, don't really mix. Now, we saw an example of that actually here in France a few months ago when Éric Zemmour and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far-right candidate who was eliminated in the first round, as was Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who came in third, they both faced off on BFM TV, and BFM TV engaged in the perilous exercise of live fact-checking during the debate. So they actually had a journalist coming in, going through the numbers, the facts and the figures, and sort of questioning the stats and the facts that were being presented by the politicians. Now, both politicians ended up being quite irked by this, and so you had this sort of awkward situation where they were debating each other, but also debating the fact-checking journalist who was sort of quizzing them on their numbers. And I suppose it did bring up some of the more, I suppose, delicate aspects of fact-checking, certainly fact-checking being done live, because what you have in a political debate always is a degree of spin. You're going to reach for the convenient facts and figures compared to the inconvenient facts and figures. And if you then engage in a process of fact-checking, perhaps the politician in question didn't assemble his numbers in the most objective way, but in a way that is favourable. So this is something that definitely has its perils. A lot of journalists looking into that are journalism, I suppose, academics. One is in this article here, I think is quite an interesting one to look at. If I could find the... That's it, the reference in question. He's Olivier Ersteld, and he talks about vérification précoce, or early verification. In other words, and this is, of course, the difficulty with the live fact-checking of a debate, you might not be able to assemble all the facts and figures in real time when you're talking about complicated statistics. Certainly in a country like France, where there's a lot of red tape, a lot of legislation, it might take a little bit of time to piece together the complete picture. So there you go. There is a degree of risk in that exercise, and certainly it is a delicate one, and it needs chiefly the resources and the people and a little bit of time to assemble it without the I suppose, the risk of inaccuracies.
Well, I can see the professor you're referring to that, making that distinction between fast-checking and fact-checking.
Exactly, that's exactly it.
So give us a sense of some of the inaccuracies that were thrown up during the course of the debate.
All right. Well, there were about 12 affirmations or statements by Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen that were verified here by our colleagues at France TV Info. Now, what is interesting to notice when you scroll down through them, what they're saying is mostly true, plutôt vrai, is about as close as you get to completely false in this particular list. True or mostly true. There weren't that many outright big lies that you might associate more with American politics, where things can get very, very inaccurate. Now, one lie that was, or inaccuracy, shall we say, that was definitely pointed out was Marine Le Pen was very critical of the Emmanuel Macron's supporting wind turbines or alternative energy, and she was critical of the closing of nuclear power plants in France. So she said there's going to be all these wind farms opened up all along the French coastline, except in Touquet. There's going to be no wind farms, or there was meant to be a wind farm set up there, and it was cancelled. Le Touquet is where Emmanuel Macron and his wife have their second home or country home. That is actually not entirely true. And she spoke of 50 wind farms being opened across the French coastlines. Actually, it's closer to 7. So certainly in that particular instance, that's one example of quite a few inaccuracies around that issue of wind turbines that were identified by France TV Info.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for helping us make sense of all of that. Thank you. James
Thanks,
Greedon
John.
for today's edition of Truth or Fake.